our guest. He is the National Security Advisor to the Clarion Project, clarionproject.org. He also is a writer for frontpagemag.com. He is a man that we actually have talked about this issue with, Ryan Mauro. Ryan, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. I want to go to a clip from December 1st, 2009, the announcement at West Point of, this is kind of a cut together. First, he addresses the Iraq troop withdrawal, and then he announces part of the plan for the Afghan surge. Roll it.
We will remove our combat brigades from Iraq by the end of next summer, and all of our troops by the end of 2011. The 30,000 additional troops that I'm announcing tonight will deploy in the first part of 2010, the fastest possible pace. And now we must come together to end this war successfully. For what's at stake is not simply a test of NATO's credibility. What's at stake is the security of our allies and the common security of the world. We're in Afghanistan to prevent a cancer from once again spreading through that country. But this same cancer has also taken root in the border region of Pakistan. And that's why we need a strategy that works on both sides of the border.
Ryan, let's first handle Iraq. That's an announcement that was met with a lot of support because of a war-weary nation, as we have been, seeing our brave men and women go over and serve and really not being told much about them, unless, of course, it's the casualty figures, especially in light of the success of the surge and the ideological tilt to the left of the mainstream media. But that first announcement about leaving Iraq was met with a lot of enthusiasm from a lot of Americans. Now we have the result of that. Tell me, Ryan, your thoughts on President Obama and, quote, and I've said it, abandoning Iraq. Go.
Well, I think just to be fair, I wouldn't place all the blame on President Obama for the withdrawal. I think it's important to note that President Bush signed the agreement with the Iraqis to withdraw American forces, and then President Obama was supposed to come in and then negotiate an extension of that, and he failed to do so. Now, why did he fail to do so? The reason is because the Iraqi government refused to grant immunity from prosecution for U.S. soldiers. What that means is that U.S. soldiers serving in Iraq could potentially have been arrested by the Iraqi police and prosecuted. And, of course, President Obama said that that's just something we're not going to go along with. And that was the real sticking point as to why the U.S. forces pulled out completely from Iraq. So there's criticism on both ends here,
okay,
but I think that to some degree, what?
With due respect, the fact is President Bush certainly secured that. There was a hands-off approach, an arm's-length approach. They decided to put it before Parliament, knowing that that would cause a problem, and it has been described by some journalists as the poison pill in the sense of the agreement. And to me, it was a very different approach than President Bush had. Bush was conditional. Bush had all sorts of things that were different, but he worked with Maliki. He was hands-on, and he secured these types of agreement. The message from day one from President Obama was, we want out. Am I wrong?
To some degree you are, which is that President Bush wanted an open-ended commitment to Iraq where U.S. forces would be allowed to stay until the security situation stabilized. The Iraqis insisted on a timeline, and President Bush eventually agreed to that with the condition that once we come to the end of a certain time period, then we could revisit the issue and then potentially get an extension on that timeline. So President Obama was basically operating within the time frame that President Bush negotiated, and President Obama failed to reach an extension of that timeline. And the reason that happened is because of the point earlier that I made, which is that he didn't want American soldiers in Iraq to be prosecuted by the Iraqi authorities.
Right, but the fact is that could have been worked with. That could have been secured. And that had to do with the relationship and trust with Uncle Joe Biden in charge, stating the fact that it would be really, he hung his vice presidency on the idea that he'd be able to get the status of forces agreement. So, but I understand where you're coming from. If you want to add what, you can have the last word in this part. Go ahead.
I think the problem is that a lot of it is hypothetical, and we're not privy to those discussions that were going on behind the scenes. So it's hard to know exactly how hard President Obama was pushing to keep American troops in Iraq. According to the leaks at the time, he wanted to leave behind a certain amount of armed troops, but he wasn't going to call them combat troops. He was going to call them advisors, just to play a game of semantics. And then ultimately they were unable to come to an agreement. It is a factor, was one of the factors, President Obama's blatant lack of a commitment to Iraq. Very possibly. It's just you're dealing with something that doesn't have metrics, so it's hard to prove.
Okay. But the metrics were that the generals were requesting more troops to stay, far more troops to stay than what President Obama was going to, even with the semantics of troops, calling them troops or not troops. It was...
That is true. That is true. The generals in Iraq did say, we want you to try to negotiate to X number of troops in Iraq, and President Obama said, look, if I get an extension on the timeline, it's only going to be between 5,000 and 10,000 troops. And it's very possible at that point the Iraqis said, well, you're either fully in and on our side or you're not. And they weren't willing to go along with that half measure.
Ryan, leaving the topic only to get to the other topic because of time constraints, and we do appreciate you making time for us tonight, as always. Robert Gates's memoir, we only have excerpts from it, but it's pretty damning, quite frankly. Do you believe the decision was made on politics, or was the decision made on the ability for us to carry out the mission that was before us and the goals that were stated by President Obama in 2009 December?
It came down to two things. It came down to politics. Like you mentioned, it was very unpopular for the U.S. to be sending more soldiers over to Afghanistan. And secondly, and I think that former Secretary of Defense Gates really illustrates this, is that President Obama just didn't want to be involved in Afghanistan. So it's not just about the politics. It's just not a fight that he wanted to be involved in. And so when the generals were saying you need to be sending a certain amount of troops, some were requesting like 45,000, 50,000, he was saying, no, that's just too much. And he started acting as if he was the general. He was the one saying, well, I'm willing to send 30,000, but not an additional 15,000, when in reality, he's not a military expert. That just comes down to emotion. I'm comfortable with this number of soldiers going. And you shouldn't have a president judging force levels based on emotion or based on personal comfortability. It should be based on what are our objectives and what numbers do you need in order to meet those objectives.
As we didn't really hear too much about Afghanistan, and the death toll certainly was rising, more deaths under President Obama than President Bush. Again, not trying to play politics here, but it is a sharp contrast in the coverage of the two wars, or two war fronts, when it came to President Bush versus President Obama. I know, Captain Obvious just entered the building. The question for you, though, is with the rules of engagement, with the announcement that we were leaving and the direction of Iraq and the signal being sent, did President Obama ever think did he give up on this mission? And has he given up? And if that's the case, if so, in any way, why doesn't he pull them all out right now? Go ahead.
I think that he made the judgment that we could improve the situation on the ground, but it wouldn't be a dramatic transformation of the situation on the ground. And that's why he said, look, we have to negotiate with the Taliban, because in his mind, that we can never defeat the Taliban unless we want to make an extraordinary commitment that we'll never agree to. And so I think that right from the beginning, and actually it was clear from his speeches, he was thinking about an exit, even more so than the objectives he wanted to meet. So he said, okay, I'll send in an additional 30,000 soldiers. We'll learn from Bush's success in Iraq, apply it to Afghanistan to at least make things better so I can have that under my belt. And then I'm going to get the heck out of there. And that seems to be what has transpired. And I think that the testimony of Gates is really, really damning. It's really going to hurt Obama's legacy on this issue. But unfortunately, nobody talks about the war in Afghanistan anymore, especially President Obama. He doesn't go around praising our troops' success. He just basically wants everyone to forget about it.
And with that in mind, what about the soldiers? You have been putting the soldiers first from day one, and we've talked about it. But putting them in harm's way and the political calculation. I understand that politics is the art of what's possible, and you've got a poor choice phrase, but sell the war, so to speak. But that's merely explaining why it's important, why we're putting blood on the line. I'm not even addressing the treasure, the blood on the line. And we're learning that emotion and the request levels of troops was still under what was requested. With 30,000, the lowest number, as I recall, was 40,000. So, to me, this makes me sick to my ripping stomach. Pardon the expression. Go ahead.
It should. Everyone listening right now should be upset at this, because whether you think we should be in Afghanistan or not, I think we all agree that you need to support the troops. Think about the sacrifices that they're making, not just in terms of blood and being shot at, but think about the stress that they're putting on their family, how much fun they could be having back at home, but they're not doing that because they're serving the country. And the least we can ask our president is to go out and brag about their successes, go out and visit them, and do everything he can where even if he wants to pull out of Afghanistan, show them that their work on the ground is being appreciated and brag about it. And this is a sharp contrast between President Obama and President Bush. Even when the war in Iraq was at its height of unpopularity, President Bush still addressed it, still praised the achievements on the ground. He was on top of that. He never forgot about them. He always talked about the troops. President Obama, on the other hand, would prefer to talk about the economy and healthcare and just make this issue go away. And that's just hard to watch. As a commander-in-chief, to watch a commander-in-chief do that, it's very difficult.
I have to have you back on Thursday or Friday. I'll talk to you about it. I know we're running low on time, about to hit the hard break, but bottom line, appreciate you. Great article on Syria and explaining who's a part of that, certainly, and the two sides, Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda Light, and why we're there in the position we're in. Ryan Mauro, Clarion Project, clarionproject.org, national security analyst. Thank you, my friend. Great to be with you.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. More on the flip side. Unemployment insurance, minimum wage. Will these stimulate economic growth? Allow people to get jobs? AFR Talk.